A few weeks ago in Kyushu, Takami was sitting and thinking about matters that were beyond his expectations. Takami felt regretful, because he could have handled them well, but the results did not turn out as expected. Although Takami was talking on the phone, he made the people around him scream in excitement. Takami was indeed a very famous hero to everyone, and the one currently calling him was Dabi. At that moment, Takami silently confirmed that since Dabi had taken the initiative to call him, it proved Takami held some value for Dabi to exploit. Therefore, he decided to play the fool. Takami accepted the risk in exchange for potential benefits. After that, he reported to his superiors. Although Takami had some initial success, Dabi's group was still cautious of him. Therefore, all communication between Takami and his superiors was being monitored by them. So Takami had no choice but to use coded signals to communicate. And he would soon uncover the origin of the Nomu. Afterward, Takami went to check on Hakamada's health, which took Hakamada by surprise. Luckily, his health was gradually improving. However, Hakamada had completely lost his lungs. Until now, he still could not believe he had survived. After that, Takami asked Hakamada about his upcoming plans. So at this moment, Hakamada shared with him, he planned to reveal himself soon, because many people were still waiting for Hakamada's return. On Midoriya's side, he was allowed to return home to visit his mother, because today was New Year's Eve. Therefore, all students had a day off to return home. At this moment, Midoriya shared with his mother about the time he spent training at UA High School. However, Midoriya's mother was very worried about him, because of the dangerous times at UA High School. After that, Midoriya also mentioned Eri. That little girl had given Midoriya a letter. Eri had worked hard to learn writing just to do this for him, which made Midoriya very happy about it. And his mother burst into tears from being so touched. She recalled the memories of Midoriya's childhood. Back then, he always idolized All Might. Even knowing he would get hurt, he still tried to save people in times of trouble. And now, in the present, Midoriya's mother felt very proud when she saw the grown-up image of her son. Finally, Midoriya's mother felt relieved about her son. And then they celebrated a new beginning. Midoriya's mother saw him off as he returned to UA High School. But before that, Midoriya, Bakugo, and Shoto went to the Endeavor Agency. When all three of them arrived, at that moment, Todoroki was the one who greeted them. However, he did not seem very welcoming toward Bakugo. But since Shoto had asked him, Todoroki reluctantly agreed. It turned out that the three of them came here this time for an internship. And Midoriya felt very grateful for this, because he had the chance to be there. Previously, Midoriya had been very impressed with Todoroki at the sports festival. And Todoroki was certainly a reliable hero. It turned out that All Might had been very happy a few days ago, because they wanted to go to the Endeavor Agency to train. Taking this opportunity, Midoriya really wanted to practice more with One for All. So All Might would surely ask Todoroki to focus on this matter. For Bakugo, this was also a great opportunity, because he had many similarities with Todoroki. Thanks to this, Bakugo could observe Todoroki up close. For All Might, this was truly a good chance. Returning to the present moment, Midoriya was determined to make the most of this opportunity. However, things would not be so easy. Todoroki began testing them, because Todoroki had received a signal from the universe. On the streets, a dangerous villain suddenly appeared. So Todoroki quickly headed toward them. All three of them were also following behind Todoroki. At this moment, Midoriya was very surprised by his speed. And the one causing chaos right now was Star Servant. He was throwing everything around into disorder. Star Servant wanted to turn this place into darkness. Luckily, Todoroki arrived in time to confront him. Coming here to stir up trouble today was a mistake for Star Servant, because Todoroki would surely punish him. After that, Star Servant realized things were not going well, so he immediately tried to escape. However, Todoroki was chasing after him, and with the cooperation of Midoriya's group, Star Servant was quickly defeated. Afterward, he was handed over to the police. Unexpectedly, Takami also appeared there, which left Midoriya feeling confused. He quickly introduced himself to Takami. Unexpectedly, Takami already knew some information about Midoriya, which made Midoriya even more surprised. At that moment, Todoroki asked Takami why he had come there. Although Takami had nothing particularly important, he wanted to ask Todoroki about a mysterious book. However, Todoroki knew nothing about it. After that, Takami shared. Unexpectedly, this book had become very popular recently. Although it had been published a long time ago, the predictions from its contents were very accurate. And Takami also found this matter very interesting. So he introduced it to Todoroki. He even pointed out the important parts, so that Todoroki could pay attention to them. However, Todoroki did not understand anything. It turned out this was Takami's true purpose. He wanted to use this book as a means of communication. Because Takami was currently being monitored by others, he could only use this method. At that moment, Todoroki felt a very strange sensation. Then Takami quickly handed the book to Todoroki. To avoid being discovered by others, Takami had also prepared more copies for several other people. And he immediately left, leaving Todoroki alone, lost in thought about the story behind it. A little while later, Midoriya's group arrived at the Endeavor Agency. After that, everyone introduced them to the place. Unexpectedly, Bakugo felt very interested in the things that existed at the Endeavor Agency. Suddenly, at that moment, the Endeavor Agency received a deployment request. The staff immediately identified the location. They quickly contacted the patrol team, and Midoriya's group now had the chance to see how everyone worked. Indeed, this place was full of energy. At this moment, Bakugo became impatient. He wanted to take action immediately together with everyone. However, they all had to wait for orders from their superiors. As for Todoroki, he was investigating the book. At the same time, Todoroki remembered Takami's words. The things Takami had just said were very different from usual, which only made Todoroki more suspicious. So he focused on investigating through the book that Takami had given him earlier. In the end, Todoroki managed to understand the hidden meaning that Takami wanted to convey to him. As for Takami, he was currently attending a meeting of the Meta Liberation Army. Dabi was also present there. At this moment, Takami was gaining their trust. When the time came that he was forced to step outside, Takami still found a way to listen in on the conversation. He used his wings to capture the sound. Unexpectedly, Takami discovered a disastrous plan, which was scheduled to take place in 4 months. Meanwhile, Todoroki remained very focused. He continued to study the book. Todoroki realized that Takami was probably inside enemy territory. At this moment, Takami was also coming up with many strategies, so that he could salvage the situation before the Meta Liberation Army began to act. Meanwhile, Todoroki finally grasped some basic information about them. As for Midoriya's group, all 3 were divided into teams by Kamiji to take action. However, Bakugo was furious because only Shoto got to go with Todoroki, while he and Midoriya had to follow Kamiji. Bakugo had come here only because he wanted to work with the #1 hero. Unexpectedly, later Todoroki announced that all 3 of them would be going with him, because this internship was meant to strengthen their combat abilities. But before everyone started acting, Todoroki asked Bakugo and Midoriya to share information about the problems they were facing as well as the things they wanted to learn. At that moment, Midoriya sincerely shared. He only wanted to control his power, so that he could fight freely. After that, he showed Todoroki the extent of his energy. This power of Midoriya's could restrain almost anything. And right now, he was looking for a way to make use of it. At this moment, Midoriya did not hesitate to explain his plans for this. However, no one really understood what he was analyzing. Unexpectedly, Todoroki was the one who understood it. But Midoriya's quirk was quite difficult to manage. As for Bakugo, he came here to search for the things he himself could not do. Suddenly, Kamiji laughed at Bakugo's confidence. However, those were truly his honest feelings. Since childhood, Bakugo had been aware of his own strength. But at this moment, Bakugo realized that relying only on overwhelming power would not make him the strongest, because that had been Bakugo's original goal. As for Shoto, he also wanted to share. Until now, he had only wanted to train the quirk inherited from his father. But when Shoto thought about it, it felt meaningless. However, after entering Ua High School, Shoto had gained new perspectives, because he had lived with everyone and fought alongside them. In the end, Shoto finally awakened. All his actions had been shaped by his thoughts about Todoroki. But the person Shoto truly idolized was All Might. He came here with his own will, and with the resolve of a hero. Therefore, Shoto wanted Todoroki not to act like a father toward him. Although Todoroki was the #1 hero, even now, Shoto still could not forgive what Todoroki had done to his mother. After everyone had made their feelings clear, they began to take action. On the way, Todoroki shared strategies for them to act. Thanks to his prior experience, it was now their turn. All three had to gain experience for themselves. Suddenly, Todoroki moved unexpectedly. Everyone was surprised by his incredible speed. Meanwhile, Midoriya recalled his own journey. That gave him even more motivation. As for Todoroki, he was closely pursuing the villain. He successfully captured him. After that, they moved to the next location. For Todoroki, time was extremely important. It was also connected to the lives of the people. Therefore, they had to stay focused on the mission. Because this was not a classroom, but a real world. The experience of fighting in school was completely different from the outside world. No matter what situation they were in, Todoroki advised them not to worry. They could fail without fear. But through that, the three of them would gain experience. And they needed to keep moving forward. Finally, they finished their first day of training. Meanwhile, Ochako arrived at the Ryuku agency. She had also just finished her training session. After that, Ochako and everyone joined a party. A little while later, they saw shocking news. It turned out that there had been a huge explosion at the Toriga factory. And that place was producing illegal drugs. At that moment, Ryuko realized the explosion was meant to destroy the evidence. The villains had used it to obstruct the investigation. Suddenly, Ryuko received a request to cooperate from the hero Saruki. So everyone prepared to depart. After that, they arrived just in time. It turned out Saruki needed to work with Ryuko. Because earlier he had seen a smuggling ship trying to escape. And it was connected to Toriga. Therefore, Ryuko could not ignore the matter. Asui also got the chance to meet Saruki again. In their previous meeting during a training session, Saruki had helped Asui a lot. So she was very grateful for that. Saruki had taught Asui important knowledge, so that she could become a true hero. After a while, before everyone started the mission, Saruki wanted them to relax and have fun. During that time, Saruki also had the chance to talk with Ryuko. Finally, everyone began to take action. Their ship had already departed. At that moment, Ryuko used her quirk to transform into a dragon. She was flying into the sky with the wings on her back. Saruki also used his quirk to dive deep into the sea. His purpose was to locate the enemies. However, according to everyone's observation, nothing unusual had appeared yet. Everyone began moving to the next location. As for the smugglers, they also started heading out to sea. At that moment, Saruki quickly discovered the smuggling ship. So he immediately sent a signal back to the ship. Then everyone began to take action. After the smuggling ship was detected, they used Toriga to create a smokescreen. However, the heroes were not going to let them off so easily. At that moment, Saruki successfully approached. He directly attacked the leader. Then Saruki took control of the cockpit. Unexpectedly, behind the smuggling ship was an airplane. The smugglers planned to escape using it, but Ryuko was trying to chase after them. The next one to act was Ochako. Even though Ochako had only just begun, she successfully managed to reach the airplane. At that moment, the people on the airplane were dealt with. However, the airplane was having some problems. So Ochako focused on controlling it. She absolutely refused to give up. After that, with everyone's cooperation, Ochako was finally safe. Ryuko successfully protected the cargo. As expected, they were chemicals used to produce illegal substances. Thus, everyone finally completed the mission. The operation ended successfully. Everyone still returned to relax and have fun together. As for Midoriya, at this stage, he was determined to keep chasing after Todoroki. Because Midoriya wanted to achieve his own goal, which was to become the greatest hero. When night fell, there was a thief on the street. He passed by a man and stole a valuable briefcase. At that moment, Todoroki's group discovered it. They quickly moved to restrain the thief. Unexpectedly, Todoroki was the fastest to catch him. But clearly, the one who noticed first was Shoto. That left the others feeling a little disappointed. Next, they received another mission. This time, they immediately set out. Of course, Todoroki was once again the first to arrive. After completing the mission, everyone returned to the Endeavor agency. At that moment, Todoroki received a phone call. It turned out to be Fuyumi. She called because she knew that Shoto had gone to his father's place for training. When Fuyumi heard this news, she was deeply moved. However, Fuyumi didn't understand why Todoroki kept this a secret. But he couldn't answer her at all. Even every night, Todoroki thought about his family. Although he himself didn't often return home. In the past, Todoroki had made many mistakes with his family. And he had hurt his own wife. That caused Todoroki's children to be unable to forgive him. Although he gradually came to understand the seriousness of the problem. Even up to now, Todoroki didn't know how to mend things. Once, he had asked All Might a question. What exactly was the symbol of peace? It turned out that for All Might, it was someone who could move forward with strong confidence. That person was both hope and also a wake-up call. And All Might worked very hard to become such a person. That was his definition of the symbol of peace. However, Todoroki needed to find his own way, so that he could find its meaning for himself. The next morning, an emergency suddenly occurred at the Endeavor agency. So everyone had to prepare for action. Today, Shoto was determined to surpass Todoroki. And Bakugo felt the same way. It was time for everyone to go. They were focusing on controlling their power. Unexpectedly, Todoroki arrived very quickly. He successfully rescued the civilians in an instant. Indeed, Todoroki was the #1 hero, which made Midoriya's group unable to deny it. For Todoroki, being able to act like that immediately was impossible. They needed to build up experience day by day. Even though everyone tried their best today, Midoriya's group still couldn't catch up to Todoroki. However, Shoto felt that they had improved much more compared to the day before. This was truly something to look forward to. When night came, Fuyumi invited everyone to her house for dinner. At that moment, she was very happy to see them, especially because they were Shoto's friends. And Midoriya truly cherished this. However, Bakugo was the opposite. He had no interest in staying here at all. A little later, when it was time for dinner, Fuyumi took the initiative to introduce herself. And she also introduced everyone to Natsuo. After that, they all happily enjoyed dinner together. Midoriya was surprised by Fuyumi's cooking skills. As for Natsuo, he felt uncomfortable eating together with Todoroki. So Natsuo chose to leave. Even Midoriya and Bakugo could feel that tension. When it was time for Fuyumi and Shoto to clean up, Fuyumi was very happy, because Shoto had gone to his father's office for training. So Fuyumi thought that perhaps he had forgiven Todoroki. Suddenly, Shoto shared something. He had always believed that the burn on his face was caused by his father. But in truth, it wasn't. It turned out that it was his mother who caused it. But the reason behind it was that her emotions had exploded because of Todoroki's actions before that. Therefore, Shoto couldn't simply forgive him for the things that Todoroki had done. In reality, Shoto didn't even know how to deal with it. That made him extremely troubled. Suddenly, Bakugo appeared outside the room. He was angry because he had accidentally overheard their conversation. But Midoriya knew this was an awkward situation. So he tried to comfort Shoto. Partly to help Shoto have a more objective perspective, so that he could wisely make his own choice. As for Todoroki, he was now deeply regretful for his past actions. At this moment, Todoroki went to Toya's altar. Toya was his first son. However, during one time when he caught a villain, that villain later escaped and held a grudge against Todoroki. So he targeted Toya to satisfy his own revenge. After that, Fuyumi told everyone the details about Toya. Since childhood, Toya had been very close to Natsuo. However, ever since their mother fell ill, everything completely changed. Natsuo firmly refused to forgive Todoroki because he believed that Todoroki was the one who caused Toya's death. Suddenly, Todoroki appeared. It turned out it was time for them to return to the Endeavor agency. Before everyone left, Fuyumi suddenly thanked Midoriya for being willing to be Shoto's friend. After that, on the way back, Shoto suddenly saw Natsuo in danger. At that moment, Todoroki frantically rushed toward the villain because he wanted to save his son. It turned out that this man was Ending. Todoroki recognized his identity, so he demanded that Ending release Natsuo. But things weren't that simple. This villain had twisted thoughts. The reason Ending approached Todoroki was because he wanted Todoroki to burn him alive. Just like Todoroki once did to Nomu. At that moment, Midoriya's group began to take action. However, since Ending couldn't achieve his original goal, he completely lost his mind. He even caused chaos in the surrounding area. Suddenly, at this moment, Midoriya was able to fully control his own power, thanks to the guidance Todoroki had given him earlier. Then Midoriya used a new technique of one for all to save the lives of civilians. Even Todoroki was surprised by Midoriya's improvement. As for Bakugo, he successfully rescued Natsuo. Suddenly, Todoroki rushed forward to embrace his son. Meanwhile, Shoto captured the villain. In the end, everything was over. At that moment, Todoroki felt guilty toward his children. In fact, he didn't intentionally distance himself from them. But it's true that Todoroki avoided his responsibility. He simply chose to run away. At this moment, Natsuo didn't believe his father's words. And he couldn't possibly forgive Todoroki, because Natsuo wasn't as warm as Shoto. Suddenly, he burst into tears after expressing his feelings. At this time, Todoroki had no choice but to accept it. He didn't beg them for forgiveness. Instead, Todoroki only wanted to make up for his children in the present. Natsuo's tears couldn't stop flowing. After he heard those words from his father, their relationship gradually began to change. After that, the police arrived at the scene to deal with the villain. Meanwhile, Midoriya's group drew the attention of people around them because of their actions just moments ago. And so, the hero internship came to an end. Their third semester would officially begin. At this time, Iida announced to the whole class that today's activity would be a practice press conference. After that, everyone headed to Alpha Stadium. While the girls were changing clothes, they noticed that Ochako had changed her combat outfit, and it actually suited her very well. Meanwhile, Midoriya had managed to control his own power, which greatly surprised the classmates around him, because within a short period of time, Midoriya had successfully gained control. On the way everyone was heading to the training location. All Might had already been waiting for them in advance, since Aizawa suddenly had urgent business. It turned out he was on his way to Tartarus prison, and Yamada also went along with Aizawa. It turned out they came here to interrogate Kurogiri. Unexpectedly, everyone learned the truth here. Kurogiri was actually Oboro. In the past, the three of them were very close friends, and their goal was to become heroes. Each of them had their own unique strength. So Oboro came up with the idea for everyone to form a team. However, he later died during his hero internship. That was such a sudden death. Even Aizawa at that time could not accept it. Returning to the present, Kurogiri was actually a Nomu, and Oboro's body had been used as the foundation. At that moment, Yamada became extremely furious. After he learned the truth about this matter, Yamada could not understand what meaning their actions had. After that, Yamada and Aizawa directly went to meet Kurogiri. Both of them hoped they could awaken the human inside Oboro. At that moment, Kurogiri awoke. He was very excited to meet the heroes again. Since the day Kurogiri attacked Ua High School until now, he had never faced them directly. After a few words from Kurogiri, Yamada felt that he was nothing like Oboro. Suddenly, Aizawa noticed something in Kurogiri. At that moment, he remembered their old memories. When they first met in the classroom, although Aizawa was a bit distant, Kurogiri always took the initiative to talk to him. Because Kurogiri was a cheerful person, he only knew how to look forward. However, when death came to Kurogiri, everything almost came to an end. At that moment, Aizawa revealed, both he and Yamada were now working as teachers. They had always been very strict with their students. Sometimes the students even felt terrified whenever they looked into Aizawa's eyes. However, that was exactly his intention. Aizawa did not want his students to become heroes for the sake of justice. While disregarding their own lives, Aizawa wanted everyone to be like Oboro. He could become a hero and help others move forward. Aizawa hoped that all three of them could return to become heroes in the most complete way. Suddenly, Kurogiri's brainwaves showed some abnormalities. Perhaps he was shaken by Aizawa's words. However, under that pressure, Kurogiri completely did not understand what everyone was saying. Even though Aizawa was so helpless that he shed tears, things did not go as they had hoped. Aizawa felt guilty because he could not help any further with the investigation. Torino also felt guilty. Because of him, Aizawa and Yamada had to recall those painful memories. However, Torino would try his best to uncover the truth behind this matter. And so, the story ended there. About 2 months earlier, this giant was called Gigantomachia. He possessed extraordinary strength. Not only that, Gigantomachia was also very skilled at adapting to quirks. Unexpectedly, this being had once been an assistant to All for One. However, he had been hidden away by All for One for unknown reasons. At that time, due to orders from above, Dabi wanted to subdue Gigantomachia. Thus, the two had an intense confrontation. However, Dabi eventually failed and returned. Because of Gigantomachia's overwhelming power, Dabi simply could not match him. By the time he went back, then Dabi discovered that Garaki was deeply focused on his research. He was also a loyal assistant of All for One. In this research, Garaki wanted to create a new, more advanced Nomu. At that moment, Garaki turned his attention to Tamura. Garaki immediately asked about his father's health, because aside from Tamura, compared to the others, this was Garaki's first time meeting them. Suddenly, Garaki began to question Tamura regarding his recent weak actions. Garaki wanted to re-evaluate Tamura, because he wanted to see whether Tamura was truly worthy of all the efforts Garaki had put in. However, up until now, Tamura still had not accomplished anything. As for him, ever since childhood, Tamura had been abandoned. It was All for One who saved his soul. After Tamura was embraced by him, Tamura finally realized. Before that, he had only been a walking corpse. From the day All for One started teaching Tamura, that was also the chance for Garaki to meet him. At that time, he gave Tamura many hands. Those were exactly the hands of his own family. In Tamura's mind at that moment, there were only shattered images. Perhaps it had haunted him too deeply. All for One even used those hands, placing them all over Tamura's body. However, he then became strangely calm. Now Tamura no longer had any emotions controlling him. And that was exactly All for One's original intention. As time went on, the only thought left in Tamura's mind was to destroy everything. Even living things made Tamura feel disgusted. And that made Garaki feel excited. At this moment, Tamura also needed his assistance. He would make everything disappear. Suddenly, Garaki burst into gleeful laughter. Although he had some doubts about Tamura's abilities, when he saw Tamura's serious expression, Garaki decided to help. He had always intended to support Tamura. Garaki had even already prepared a compilation of power for him. But Garaki had not acted yet, because he believed Tamura's power was still too weak. Garaki wanted him to meet the standards that he had set with a simple goal. As long as Tamura could find a way to make Gigantomachia submit, Garaki would be ready to devote everything to him. However, Dabi would not participate in this mission. He still had many other matters to deal with. After that, Garaki led everyone to Gigantomachia's location. This time, Tamura returned once again, but his spirit was completely different from before. Then they faced off against Gigantomachia. At first, Tamura seemed to struggle, because Gigantomachia's power was overwhelming. Even after half a month had passed, Gigantomachia still completely refused to acknowledge Tamura. During battle, Gigantomachia's body would grow larger. No matter where Tamura tried to hide, he would always be found. The fight seemed difficult, yet Tamura still wore a terrifying smile. After some time, Tamura gradually gained the upper hand. He wanted Gigantomachia to kneel before him. That was why Tamura was now extremely determined. Suddenly, some bad news arrived. The places where they had been fighting had already aroused the suspicion of the police. Because the scene had many suspicious traces. It turned out this was all caused by Rikiya's actions. He was a commander of the Meta Liberation Army. And at that moment, he was holding Okuda captive. Rikiya's goal was to liberate quirks, so that everyone in the world could unleash 100% of their abilities. However, Tamura was currently very busy. He did not have time for Rikiya. Because of that, Rikiya kept Okuda as a hostage. He would hold him until his original plan was completed. At this moment, Rikiya set a condition. If Tamura's group came to his designated meeting place, then Tamura would definitely release Okuda. Therefore, they all became confused. Everyone wanted to act quickly. After that, Tamura informed Garaki about everything. He did not expect that the Meta Liberation Army still existed. As for Tamura, he prepared to continue fighting Gigantomachia. But now Tamura had already figured out his weakness. His plan was to use Gigantomachia. and led him straight to the Meta Liberation Army. Both sides would fight and massacre each other, and Tamura would be the one to end this battle. At that moment, they were keeping track of the time, to make sure it coincided with Gigantomachia waking up. As long as he chased after Tamura, Gigantomachia would surely clash with the Meta Liberation Army. Meanwhile, Dabi did not want to get involved in this troublesome matter. Suddenly, someone arrived. It turned out to be Tokaname. He was the one who guided the way to reach the Meta Liberation Army's base. Everyone followed behind Tokaname. At that moment, Hanabata was already waiting for them. He was the leader of the Meta Liberation Army. Then Hanabata suddenly ordered his men to start the battle, which left Tamura's group a bit confused. At this time, two girls were also facing each other. They were Kazuki and Himiko. In this battle, Rikia was extremely confident, because he knew there were no Nomu with them. To Rikia, the League of Villains without Nomu was nothing more than a bunch of failures. As for Kazuki, under her verbal provocations, Himiko seemed unable to hold back. She began attacking everyone. At that moment, Himiko used her quirk to suck people's blood, so she could transform into their appearance. But Himiko's plan failed, because Kazuki caused the things she wanted to explode. Her purpose was to stop Himiko's attacks. However, it did not affect Himiko at all. Since childhood, Himiko had been a strange girl. She had even sucked blood from her friends, along with her bizarre interests. This made Himiko become increasingly distant from others. Society could not accept her existence. Kazuki took advantage of that, and struck directly at Himiko's issues. Then Kazuki slowly launched her attack on Himiko. Luckily, Himiko managed to escape. At this moment, she used Ochako's blood to transform, and thus Himiko gained Ochako's quirk. She successfully took the initiative, which greatly surprised Kazuki's group. Perhaps Kazuki had not foreseen this, but in the end, Himiko collapsed because of the earlier damage from her opponent's attacks. Meanwhile, Dabi was also fighting. His opponent at that moment was Jiden. Jiden attacked Dabi from behind, but luckily, he managed to dodge it. Jiden did not stop there. He used his Ice Ply quirk to face Dabi. After observing the situation, Dabi immediately unleashed Blue Flame to melt his opponent's ice. That created an obstacle for Jiden. However, due to his intense training in the past, Jiden successfully countered Dabi's attack. As for Himiko, she was fortunately discovered by her comrade, Bubaigawara. He became anxious when he saw Himiko in a dangerous situation. However, even Bubaigawara himself was in trouble, because he had the quirk, Double, and that was also his obstacle. Since Bubaigawara almost got killed by his own self, he gradually lost his sense of identity. And this time, Bubaigawara was the same. Bubaigawara's clones were restraining him. It turned out that the one controlling them was Tomoyasu. His goal was to use Bubaigawara's clones to have them kill Himiko. That was like doubling the cruelty. In the past, Bubaigawara's eyes always frightened others. He stumbled repeatedly because of life's cruelty. Bubaigawara's parents had died when he was young, so from then on, he was drawn into criminal activities. There was no one around Bubaigawara, which made him extremely lonely. At that time, Bubaigawara could only talk to himself, and then he gradually went astray. When he hit rock bottom, Bubaigawara realized he truly could no longer trust himself. And from there, Bubaigawara met Okuta. They had the chance to work together up until now. Returning to the present, at this moment, Bubaigawara became anxious, because his own clones were attacking Himiko. Unexpectedly, it was that very anxiety of Bubaigawara that caused him to multiply into many copies. Now, Bubaigawara would make the Meta Liberation Army tremble. He created a huge explosion. Bubaigawara's spirit was extremely exhilarated at this moment. It turned out he did it to save his comrades. Even Rikia was surprised, because he rarely saw Tomoyasu fail like this. However, Tomoyasu immediately denied it. He claimed this was only preparation for the next step. After that, the Meta Liberation Army's forces kept attacking fiercely. They used overwhelming numbers to suppress the League of Villains. At this moment, Dabi and Jiden continued their battle. Meanwhile, Tamura's group was observing the situation. He noticed something. The closer everyone got to the Meta Liberation Army's base, the more densely enemies appeared to protect it. Suddenly, Hanabata appeared. He wanted to use words to provoke the citizens. As a result, They became even more enthusiastic in their attacks. At this moment, Bubaigaara had reached Rikia, then he multiplied into many copies. Bubaigaara wanted to make Rikia beg for mercy. But Rikia still remained very calm. A moment later, everyone had already gathered here. However, Rikia refused to be subdued. It was time for him to counterattack. With just one punch, Rikia could settle the problem. Suddenly, Tamura attacked him from behind. Unexpectedly, Rikia easily dodged that move. He insulted Tamura with words, while also focusing on the fight. Their battle began to grow tense. At this moment, under Bubaigaara's influence, he caused the Meta Liberation Army's base to collapse. And this plan was actually Tamura's idea. This was the only way for them to win this war. A few minutes earlier, at that time, Himiko was in a dangerous situation. So Bubaigaara immediately sought a way to save her life. As for Hanabata, he used his quirk, Insight, to encourage the people to fight. Because of the special electromagnetic waves in Hanabata's voice, he could boost the soldiers' physical and mental strength. So at this point, everything gradually became chaotic. Because of that, Aguchi could do nothing. However, he had nothing left to lose. Aguchi was determined to fight, to help lighten Tamura's burden. Meanwhile, Tamura himself was gradually becoming more tense. After the Meta Liberation Army's base collapsed, because of Rikia's quirk, he had now become gigantic. At this moment, Rikia was gradually losing control. This man directly attacked Tamura. It turned out Rikia was the type to bottle up his anger. The more stressed he became, the stronger his power grew. That was one of the manifestations caused by Rikia's quirk. For Tamura right now, his strength could not possibly match Rikia's. Suddenly, Tamura saw Hana's hands, which reminded him of his sister. At this moment, Tamura's mind was spinning, because memories were resurfacing inside his head. Suddenly, Tamura might have been entering an awakening stage. And then he quickly rushed toward Rikia. Rikia noticed that something was off with Tamura, because his power this time was completely different from before. Even Tamura's unnecessary movements were minimized. Rikia seemed too quick to underestimate him. At this point, the two of them faced each other seriously. Meanwhile, Tamura's memories became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, Rikia received a call from Tomoyasu. He was warning Rikia to be careful, because someone terrifying was approaching his location. It turned out to be Gigantamakia. At that moment, he was running at an unimaginable speed. And Tamura was the same. Suddenly, his original purpose began to resurface. It turned out Tamura wanted to destroy everything. His senses now felt as if they had been trained long ago. Returning to Tamura's childhood, since young, Tamura had always been forced by his father. That was because he and the whole family were forbidden to mention heroes. Even though Tamura never understood why. From then on, he thought his father truly hated him. Although Tamura's mother comforted him actively, Tamura still could not change that belief. It turned out his grandmother had once been a hero. Hana ignored their father's prohibitions, and she was determined to support Tamura's dream of becoming a hero. After that, his spirit gradually improved. Suddenly, one day, his father discovered Tamura still kept the intention of becoming a hero. He even found out about the photo of Tamura's grandmother. So his father became furious. He ended up beating Tamura to vent his anger. Tamura's father's name was Kotaro. Since childhood, Kotaro never had good feelings about heroes, because his own mother abandoned him for her hero career. From then on, Kotaro deeply hated the word hero. That was also the reason why. But Kotaro forbade everyone in the family to mention it. However, this time, Kotaro brutally beat Tamura. Because of that, Tamura's mother refused to stay silent. From the beginning, Kotaro wanted to build a happy family. Yet by that time, Kotaro seemed powerless. He never expected things would turn out this way. As for Tamura, he gradually grew to hate everything. And then Tamura felt the power within himself. After that, he killed his beloved dog, which left Tamura deeply shocked. He could not believe his own eyes. And then Hana witnessed this terrible event. So she immediately ran away. Because Tamura was terrified of being discovered, he chased after his sister. But unexpectedly, Hana was also destroyed like the dog. By Tamura's unintentional act. At that moment, his emotions surged uncontrollably. Tamura could no longer restrain this newfound power. So he destroyed everything around him. And thus, the story of Tamura slaughtering his entire family happened just like that. His mind gradually fell into panic. The guilt clung to Tamura's entire being, making him unable to put it into words. Tamura carried within himself destruction, a power that his own body could not control. It only signaled to him through an unbearable itch. After that, he was guided by All for One, who taught Tamura after seeing his hidden potential. Tamura became a symbol of fear, but he was filled with the desire to destroy. And All for One would be the one to define everything about Tamura. Unexpectedly, when Tamura saw his family shattered, he felt an immense sense of relief inside. Returning to the tense battlefield, Tamura once again rose up. Even Rikia was astonished. Then he became afraid, and the tension was slowly fading with each passing minute, which, of course, weakened Rikia's strength. Suddenly, Tamura grasped the essence of the situation. Out of nowhere, Gigantamakia awakened as well. He was charging toward Tamura to continue the fight. This made Tamura's comrades around him extremely worried. Meanwhile, the Meta Liberation Army's forces were also moving quickly. They rushed to Rikia's side to provide support in battle. Finally, Tamura struck back. He completely unleashed his quirk to the outside. At this moment, the ground here was sinking piece by piece. Tamura fought while recalling All for One's teachings, which made his emotions surge with extreme excitement. Tamura was ready to destroy everything before his eyes. At this moment, Rikia finally sensed the danger. But things had perhaps gone far beyond imagination. The area of the Meta Liberation Army was now severely destroyed. However, this was likely the consequence of Rikia, because he was the one who started the conflict. The surrounding citizens were shocked by Rikia's state. This time, he accepted defeat before everyone, because if it continued, things would only get worse. At this moment, Rikia knelt before Tamura. He accepted any punishment, if Tamura could spare the soldiers of the Meta Liberation Army. Because they were innocent, they acted only under Rikia's orders. A week later, tragedy struck a once peaceful city. After the terrifying battle earlier, many citizens had lost their lives here, which suddenly sparked heated discussions among the public. However, perhaps the war had ended with a sorrowful result. Unexpectedly, Himiko was also lost soon after. This left Bubaigawara deeply saddened by the loss. The one resembling Himiko now was merely her duplicate. After many days had passed, all the citizens gathered in a vast square. At that moment, Rikia announced surprising news. It was that the Meta Liberation Army would officially be reborn. Because Rikia had been defeated in the previous battle with Tamura, and within the plans of the Meta Liberation Army, he believed that his own vision as a leader had been too narrow. So Rikia decided to resign, and the one to inherit his position was none other than Tamura. From now on, the Meta Liberation Army would return. However, it would be under a supreme leader, Tamura Shigaraki. This time, he would rename it the Paranormal Liberation Front. In addition, Tamura appointed 9 people as action squad captains. With his confidence and overwhelming strength, he made the people extremely excited. Everyone enthusiastically cheered for Tamura. When night fell, Tamura returned to the base. He had been severely injured from the previous battle. However, through this occasion, Garaki saw the true strength of Tamura, and just as Garaki had promised, he would pass down all his power to Tamura. At Rikia's announcement meeting, surprisingly, Takami was also present there. As for Tamura, in the previous battle, Tamura's abilities had fully blossomed. Now he had become the embodiment of destruction. However, Tamura still desired more power. It turned out that he wanted to grow even stronger, so that he could completely crush the legacy of All Might, with everything Tamura possessed. A moment later, Garaki was in the process of transferring power to Tamura. However, during the next 4 months, Tamura would have to endure pain like living in hell. But once he overcame this hardship, everything would surely fall into Tamura's hands. Returning to Hero Academia, the students gathered together. Everyone showcased the skills they had learned during their internships. Ojiro surprised everyone with the speed of his punches. The trio of Shiro, Denki, and Minoru performed a beautiful combination. Meanwhile, Iida had mastered the use of Recipro Extend. Koda could now communicate fluently with animals. Next was the smooth teamwork of Ochako and Asui. They amazed everyone with their decision-making ability. As for Midoriya, He successfully showed everyone the results of his hard work. Even All Might, this time, was very proud of Midoriya, and his friends deeply admired his effort. At that moment, Midoriya ran to Ochako to tell her he was now fully able to control his own power. And he also thanked Ochako for her actions before. Their bond grew stronger at that moment. As for Aizawa, while he was resting, Eri also encountered another serious problem, because her horn was causing her discomfort. At that moment, Aizawa gently comforted Eri. Meanwhile, Midoriya and Bakugo were with All Might. He handed Midoriya a notebook. It turned out that it contained information about the previous holders of One for All. All Might had recorded in detail the abilities of the past generations. At that time, he also revealed, All for One was extremely obsessed with One for All. During the era when evil held all the power, All for One eliminated all the strong individuals completely. His cruelty grew increasingly uncontrollable. Each generation of One for All had learned different skills. This time, Midoriya would learn the ability of levitation. Suddenly, Bakugo burst out laughing, because he had already mastered this skill beforehand. So Bakugo became excited for surpassing Midoriya. When night came, they returned to the dormitory. Everyone was preparing dinner together. They enjoyed a wonderful time before the new semester began. Everyone became excited, because they were about to have more juniors at the school. Occasionally, Midoriya suddenly felt enlightened. He had never imagined experiencing such precious moments. Midoriya felt truly lucky. As for All Might, he sat alone outside, lost in many thoughts. At that moment, Aizawa appeared. This gave both of them a chance to have a conversation. Meanwhile, Takami was still on an important mission. He discovered that someone was standing behind Tamura. And regarding the Paranormal Liberation Front, Takami waited until the heroes had grown stronger. In the meantime, he would gather more information, so that Takami could expose the Paranormal Liberation Front. So, Day X is approaching. That's it for today's video. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to support Oni-chan in the upcoming videos. Thank you for watching. Love you all.